Hello there, welcome to today's lesson. We're going to be looking at some GCSE content today from particularly from the AQA spec, but it is of course applicable to a wide range of course specifications such as OCR, such as WJEC, some BTEC courses as well, and the IGCSE as well. So I hope you do get something from this lesson, as you can see from behind me, and if I just move myself out of the way very quickly, we are going to be looking at these three things today. So SMART targets, we're going to be looking at what that acronym is, each part of that, and you might have seen it written slightly differently, but the same concepts are contained within this acronym from today's lesson. We're then going to move on to our second part, which is going to be feedback, the three different continuums, you could say, or categories of feedback, because there are 6 types, but there is a way to categorise them into 3 separate forms of feedback. And then lastly, we are going to look at guidance, the 4 different ways that as a coach or an instructor, we can actually help the person that we're trying to teach or coach. We can give them feedback, we can give them advice and show them the correct technique in 4 different ways. And what we're going to see is they don't really work in isolation. The best approach is to merge them where possible to elicit the most, or elicit the best progress, I should say. So, well, without any more waiting around, we will get started. So, move myself up into the corner a little bit more, just so we can see as much as possible. There we go. So, like I said, learning objectives for today are to know the term SMART, or the terms within the acronym, to know the different types of feedback and to know the types of guidance. Then we should be able to define them and explain them. And some of us by the end will be able to evaluate the importance or the relevance or how we can actually use all of them within sporting contexts. So, just to recap, because we have covered goals and target setting before, and more specifically we have covered these 2 different types, performance goals and outcome goals. Now, to make these effective, we can use the SMART strategy, the SMART target strategy. So just to recap, performance goals, they're to do with the quality of the movement. These are to do with the own personal progress, the own personal performance, not the result, not the comparison. Okay, performance goals, there isn't any comparison apart from with the person themselves. How did you move last time? How did you move this time? Was it better or was it worse? Whereas outcome goals, the movement doesn't really matter. It's more to do with the position, the place, the timing, the weight, the score. It's the result. So those 2 different phrases, performance goals where the result doesn't matter, it's about playing well. Whereas the outcome goals are bad performance or not, I want to win at all costs, that Lombardian ethic. So what we're going to see is how we can use SMART targets to create effective performance or outcome goals. So what we'll do straight away is let's get straight to it. What is a SMART target setting? Well, it's a strategy designed to help clarify goals. It helps someone get clear on what it is that not only they want to achieve, but how they're going to be able to see if they've achieved it. When do they expect to achieve it? How are they going to measure the amount of progress experienced? So it can be used for either performance or outcome, and you'll see how shortly when we go through these 5 letters. But just remember, and this is something that you might want to note down, be it on a worksheet or on your books or wherever, SMART target setting, it's a strategy to make goals more efficient. And if we can make an efficient goal, then we're more likely to achieve it, which is going to boost motivation. It's going to protect and grow confidence. And it's going to ensure that someone keeps on progressing and participating in whatever the physical activity is. So we want to be using SMART target setting. So what are they? Specific. They are measurable. They are accepted. They are realistic, and they are time bound. If you need anything written down on SMART targets, it is this. A target which is SMART, or an efficient goal, should be specific, measurable, accepted, realistic, and time-bound. And what we're going to do now, very briefly, is go through each one of these and describe what it means to be specific, measurable, accepted, realistic or time-bound, and what a performer can actually do, some real-life examples of what they might do to achieve these criterion for smart target setting. So, specific targets to kick it off. Goals should be detailed and they should answer these three questions. Who is going to be involved? Where is this goal going to take place? Oh, get myself out of the way. So, who's involved? Where is this performance going to happen? Now, where do you expect to meet the goal for the final time? Where do you expect to put in the training? What is aiming to be accomplished? So you need to be really specific, really detailed on what it is that you're trying to achieve. So who does the target involve? What will these people involved be doing? You can talk about the performer and the coach. How often is the coach going to be talking or feeding back, or what are they going to be focusing on? Is it a team performance? Do certain members of the team need to be doing different things at different times so that the whole team can succeed? And then where will the success take place? Is it going to be every single week? Is it going to be at the 6-month big tournament? Is it going to be the annual competition, or perhaps the 4-year international flagship event like the Olympics? So in sport, this may mean for a team individual or for players giving themselves personalised goals. Are they focused on particular parts of their skill? Have they done a wide range of fitness test assessments and they've realised that 1 out of their 9 components of fitness is a little bit lower, therefore that's going to be the specific thing that they're working on pre-season. Pre-season, well that's a when, which we're going to come to in a moment. Where are they going to work on it? In the swimming pool? In the gym? Are they going to go out for road runs? So this extra detail helps paint a picture for the performer to get super clear on what it is that not only they want to achieve at the end, but the stepping stones that they need to follow, the processes that they're going to have to follow in order to achieve it. And the more specific this target is, the more likely the performer will know when they've achieved it. If it's broad, like, I want to get better at running, well, that's not specific at all, that's very generalised. Better at running, better how? Better technique, better tempo, better stride length, better speed endurance, better aerobic endurance. So there's lots of different parts of good running. So specificity helps drill down into the real issues. Measurable targets. This sort of goes hand in hand really with, well, the specific side of things, because if we can't measure a target, how are we going to know if we've actually achieved it? So going back to that rubbish example of, I want to run better. I want to get better at running. Okay, how are you going to measure if you have indeed got better? Are you going to measure your speed? The distance that you can cover in a certain amount of time? Are you going to measure the amount of strides it takes to cover a certain distance? Are you going to measure your acceleration? So you need to have in mind, the ways in which that you plan on tracking and measuring and evidencing you getting better. What should the increase be? And this is where we start to link to specificity as well. A specific target should say, by how much will the increase be? How many seconds will you take off your time? What position will you achieve? What will be, to the nearest centimetre, your personal best throw by the end of this year? So we start to get this method of measuring. You'll be able to track the work that you've done and then plot that against where you want to be. So let's say someone wants to lose weight. Okay, what's the goal weight at the end? Can you measure your weight? Yes, weighing scales. Or is it going to be skin fold calipers? Or is it going to be body fat percentage? What's the unit of measure? And then linking to specificity, you can be really specific about how much progress you want to see by a certain date. So that example there, a netball player Yes, they want to improve their fitness on court, very general. But they might choose to increase the average distance that they cover in a game, and they can measure that using GPS tracking or step counter perhaps. Well, how do they want to do that? Well, they want to increase their VO2 max test score and their sprint speed score by 5% each. So they do it once, that will give them a number. A 5% increase will give them a new number. So they'll complete training methods and training sessions to develop their speed, to develop their VO2 max. Then they'll retest, hopefully see that 5% jump. And then hopefully, when they then go into the game scenario and they start looking at the distance that they do cover, they should be able to see a 10% numerical increase because they've measured their targets and progress. Accepted. So this is to do with the performer and the person or the people, I should say, that they directly work with, be it in training or just in general life. I could probably move myself down a little bit here. In fact, it's over here. So they should be agreed upon. They should be accepted to be relevant, to be accurate, to be worthwhile by the performer, by the coach, by the family, by the best friends, by the carers, whoever it might be. If you've got a child, does the parent accept the goal that the coach and the performer are coming up with? There could be a whole manner of things, or a whole matter of things, I should say, which could be impacting that person's life at that point in time. So, for example, here a judo fighter, they might have this long-term goal of competing for an Olympic place, and then another one of an Olympic medal, perhaps. But what else is going on in their life? What state is their family in, or their financial affairs, or perhaps their physical or mental health? Are they ready for that level of commitment? Training 6-7 days a week, the physiotherapy bills, the equipment bills, the gym membership, the nutrition coach. Can they afford it at this point in time, or is it going to be of detriment to the people directly linked to them? We could have a 17, 18, 19-year-old performer about to hit their prime, but they've got a young family themselves. So is it a right time? Do they accept almost the ramifications? Do they accept the downside of them pursuing the goal? Do they agree with them going for this goal at this point in time? If they don't, and they set that goal, they're probably not going to be committed to it. And if they're not committed to the goal because they don't believe in it, they don't think it should be what they're going for 100% at the moment, well, they probably fail. So it needs to be accepted by all the parties involved. Realistic. So we've got SMA, now we've got R, realistic targets. Now I had to sort of scroll through the archives here of Rooney. I think I've managed to find it at, I think it was it 15, I think this picture might have been. 15 or 16 anyway, one of his earlier youth caps for England. And I put it in here because it's one thing to set lofty goals. I'm all for goal setting. I think they're a fantastic way to motivate, inspire, to push progress. But they should also be in line with some form of reality, some form of expectations. Because what you don't want to do is, especially for a novice or for maybe perhaps a younger person, you don't want to, they're at this level here, we don't want to set them a goal in the stratosphere. Because that's that exponential, that crazy rate of progress that they would have to complete in order to achieve that goal is unlikely. Unlikely based on their current level of progress or based on just history itself. I wonder how many professional football players, for example, have made it to pro level in the Premiership, let's say, who out of every player that's ever been there didn't get scouted before they were a teenager. It would be an interesting study. I don't know the answer, but I can't imagine it's many. Now I know there's going to be some who, they buck the trend. They're going to be people who are surprises. They miss out on all of that, then they suddenly develop, they get a keen interest, they suddenly get picked up, and then they take off. I get that can happen. But targets and goals should be realistic. They should be plotted at least close to in line with previous progress. So Rooney, for example, arguably one of the best players of his generation. Arguably, definitely up there. It's undeniable. He's up there as one of the best players. But it was okay for him to set the goal of all-time scorer at United. It was okay for him to set that because he'd had a proven track record of being the best or one of the best at every age group and every team he'd ever been a part of. So it would make sense for him to then also be the best at one of the best clubs. That was okay because it was in line with his progress and physical evidence. He'd proven himself already to be adept at football. So it made sense, it was realistic for him to set a target on pro football at an English club, possibly one of the top clubs, because he was proving himself against other really good young players. So we have to take it back to like evidence. Is this in line with what they've already shown? If it is, and maybe a little bit more, then that could be the extra incentive, that extra little 10%. Because, what's that phrase? Aim for, what is it? It's really corny. Aim for the stars, and even if you fall short, you still end up at the moon, or something like that. Which sort of rings true here. But what we don't want to do is set a target which is way off, and then we completely miss, because that's just going to be demotivating. Lastly then, we have time-bound targets. Fairly self-explanatory. We just want to set a date. Put a clock on it. There's a name for it. What's it called? Just thought of this now. I think it's called Parkinson's or Parkinson's law. I can't remember now, but it's something like a task will take the length of time you allocate to it. So you might know this as a student. You might know this from homework. You have 2 weeks to write an assignment. Okay, so if you start writing it on day one of the 2-week holiday, you'll probably take 2 weeks to write a little bit a day. You're thinking about it, you're editing it, you're drafting it. It will take you 2 weeks to complete it. Now let's say you forgot about it for the full 2 weeks, and then someone reminded you on the last night, and you had 2 hours before you had to get some sleep before school. Guarantee you still would have been able to come up with something in those 2 hours. Now, it might not have been as good as the 2-week effort, but it would have been 70, 80, 90% as good, and you would have done it in 2 hours because that was the amount of time you allocated to it. When there was a deadline, suddenly there was focus, suddenly there was attention on it, and there was this urgency. Time-bound targets, if there is a deadline, then the performer is more likely to actually work away, to chip away, because they can see when they expect to have it done. And if they go beyond that time bound, or that time deadline, they go beyond that, that's a failure. So it adds this almost accountability into the goal. Go back to that original example I gave you of I want to run better. Okay, so if we now apply all of these different stages, I want to improve my 100-meter sprint speed. I've got specific, I've got measurable, I've accepted that that's what I want to do because I play football, and some of my feedback is my speed isn't good enough and I'm missing the ball. I'm not getting to the ball first every time. Okay, so I accept I want to do it. Is it realistic? Yeah, because I've never focused on improving my speed before, so trying to increase it by 5%, that's a reasonable target. Time bound. I want to do that within a month. So now the clock's ticking. I know I've only got between 28 and 31 days to make and meet 5% progress target. So then I start breaking it down. How many days can I actually train out of those 30, let's say? Take out the weekends perhaps, take out certain other nights for other clubs and other commitments. Actually, I've only got 10 possible training nights. How am I going to structure those 10 training nights so that I meet it within the month? Suddenly there's focus in the micro detail when you start thinking about the longer term goal. Just realised I hadn't clicked up any of the time-bound target stuff there actually. So I'll leave that there for a second there. So give that a read. Goals should be given a start date and expiry date. It should be in line with previous rates. That goes back to that realistic idea. There's no point in saying, I want to, go back to that sprint example. I want to get 25% better by tomorrow. Unlikely. Because you, and probably many other people, haven't seen that jump of a 25% 100-metre sprint time ever. So it's unrealistic. That's a poor time-bound target. Now that last paragraph there, that goes back to what we were talking about probably about 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, to do with the not longer term goal, but the Olympics. So it could be a short term goal, then it could have a medium long term, then maybe a long term goal. And what we can start to do with these time bound targets is link them into each other. Like I was saying there with that 5% sprint increase within a month, I then started talking about, okay, in those days, how many times can I actually train? 10. Okay, what am I going to do in each one of those 10 training activities? It's linked to this phrase called periodization, which we'll cover in another lesson. But this idea of having this longer term, big macro target, could be 3, 4, 5 years, could be a career target. And we gradually unpack that and we start segmenting and breaking up all of our blocks of time into a training session at a time. So now we've got this massive plan lasting 5, 6, 7 years, but we know what we're doing tomorrow, which is going to help us get to that longer term target. Right, we're going to move on. We're going to move on to our feedback section now. So if I just make myself smaller. There we go. So feedback. Information a performer can use to work out if their attempt was successful and to inform future progress. Think about any exam you've ever sat. Your feedback comes in two forms. You get the score on the front, assessment of learning, what did you actually just prove? And then you've got the assessment for learning inside. You've got the constructive feedback, hopefully, saying this is what you missed off. This is what you could do to improve. Those comments, they don't actually change what score you got on the front, but it will help you get better so that the next time you do it, you should be a little bit better. So feedback, the information we can use to work out if the attempt was successful and what do we need to do to improve. It can happen during or after the skill. For example, have I got one more there? No. For example, a basketball coach on the sideline is probably going to be constantly shouting at their team. Shouting things that he wants to or she wants to change in that game. That's concurrent feedback. It's happening there and then. Head up, mark up, post up, press, hold, wait. All of these immediate small snippets of feedback tell the performers how well they're currently performing and what they should do next. So there it can be process or outcome orientated. Do we want to improve the quality of the skill or do we want to improve the quality of the outcome? So going back to the running examples that we've been using so far today, do you want to be improving the running technique or do you want to be commenting on the position in the race? Doesn't matter what you did during your run technique, I care about your end position, your end time. So we can feed back to someone on both of those. And that last point there, I know, if you do any sort of skill, whether it went right or wrong, internally, you know yourself if it was good or bad. You probably don't need someone outside of you to tell you if, let's say you take a penalty and you miss the goal. You don't need someone to tell you you missed. That was a bad shot. You already know that. It's intrinsic feedback. Extrinsic feedback, which we'll come on to, is from the outside sources. So we have our three different types. This is what I said at the start. We've got three categories. Even though we've got 6 different types, we can put them at two ends of a continuum 3 times. So positive and negative feedback. We've got knowledge of results, knowledge of performance, and we've got extrinsic feedback, intrinsic feedback. So rather than trying to remember 6 individual types, remember them on these scales. Positive, negative, results or performance, extrinsic or intrinsic. So we're going to look at the positive, negative first. And what you can see, if I move myself out of the way, what you can see here is a bit of a chart. So positive, what is positive feedback? Well, it's anything which draws attention to the good things. Anything that tells the performer what they've done right. So let's say we are talking about a coach analysing a performer. They draw out everything that they like, everything they want to see the performer do next time. If we want to keep that element of the skill, we tell them during positive feedback. Lovely running technique, lovely driving knee. Now, if we're talking about a high jump, it could be great eye positioning, great run-up speed, great arc on the run, excellent hip drive. But that's when the negative feedback comes in, the but. This is what you didn't like. This is the error. This was what was absent from this skill movement. So positive, I like this. It's the praise. The negative feedback is the downside. I didn't see this. I didn't see, going back to the high jump, you didn't have a good lead arm. It was down by the side. You didn't use that to gain extra thrust to go up into the air. You didn't arch your back. You went over flat, which is why your hips and your bum, your glutes, grazed the bar and knocked it off. So positive, all the good things that we liked about the skill and what we want to see again. The negative is what we didn't like, or the absence, what it was missing. So they both work. Before we go further, they both work. Even though negative feedback might, like you can see there in red, it might reduce the confidence of the performer, but only if we use it at the wrong time and with the wrong person, and we don't back it up with constructive feedback, let's say, the pointers to improve it next time. So negative feedback could be, so in the high jump, you went over flat. Didn't like it, you went over flat. Well, that alone might tell the performer, it tells them what not to do, but it doesn't tell them what to do next time. So often negative feedback is coupled with the corrective measure. So you went over straight. What you should do is go over in this arched shape. Press and push your hips up to the sky so that your shoulders dip, your hips carry on rising, and then drag your legs over it as well. So we've got the error plus the correction. Going back to your exam paper, you've got the bad score on the front, but all of the tweaks and changes to make inside. That's when negative feedback becomes powerful. And if anything, it becomes better than positive feedback, which on the face of it, you think positive works better. Because if you just tell someone, oh, I like that, that was good, that was good, that was good, that went really well. Well, they already know how to do that. They already know how to do those parts. What's the point in that feedback? Now, to an extent, for a novice performer doing something for the first time, they need to be told what parts of their skill were the best parts and what to keep for next time. Yes, that's where the value is. But for an elite performer, for someone who already knows what's good and bad and they're looking for marginal gains, they don't need to be told what went well. They already know that. They need to be told the errors, the gaps, what they can change for next time to get better. Second category then, we have knowledge of results, knowledge of performance. Now we've already said results are the outcomes, the scores, the data, whereas the performance is this more qualitative, the descriptions of the movement, not the consequences of the movement. So knowledge of results could be things like win percentage, could be things like final score, final speed, winning time, leaderboard place. Whereas knowledge of performance could be efficiency, the economical movement, the accuracy, the coordination, the comfort, the ease, the smoothness. All of these descriptive words, these adjectives to describe the overall quality of the movement, not necessarily what that quality movement actually ended up producing. So which one works, which one doesn't work? Well, we've got the effectiveness column down there. So for knowledge of results, it doesn't work if the performance was shoddy. If it was a bad performance and the person ends up winning, well, that could, that knowledge of the win, of the successful result, that masks the bad performance. So the person might actually be deteriorating in quality, but because they're playing or matched up against easier circumstances, they think that they're getting better. So what happens when they actually meet someone who's a difficult opponent? They're not going to be prepared. Whereas if they just focus on themselves, the knowledge of performance, that's where their goals and feedback and progress is orientated, then they're always going to be getting better. Going way back to the start of the lesson, performance goal or outcome goal? Well, knowledge of performance matches with performance goals. No, they're insular. They're the person against the person. No, self-progress, not comparison against others, which is what knowledge of results often relies on. And lastly, intrinsic and extrinsic feedback. Intrinsic and extrinsic. Internal feedback coming from within. It's the person's opinions, what they feel, what they think, all of this information from their sense organs coming into their body. And we've done a little bit of work on information processing already, with that feedback loop going back into the input and back into decision-making processes. Well, intrinsic feedback is what the person thinks just happened. Did it go well? Did it feel like it was comfortable? Yes, no, maybe. Whereas the extrinsic feedback is from outside of the person, from the coach, from the stands, from the video, from the data. The things that they can't suss out for themselves. And we've got pros and cons for both. So look at the effectiveness of the intrinsic feedback. It's great for a performer to make adjustments by themselves. In the moment, they can instantly work out if what they're doing is correct. They can adjust and tweak things from one moment to the next. A tennis player, for example, limited in their communication from the stands. They might be able to pick up the odd, like hand signal or cue word, something like that. But a lot of the time, that tennis player is there by themselves. Every time they finish a game, they're reflecting. How did that feel? What worked? What didn't work? I've been trying forehand winners down the line, and every time the opponent is getting there with a backhand slice. Not working. How can I change that up? What can I tweak in my own game based on what I'm currently thinking? So it's great for elite performers to trust their gut, to make these minor adjustments all the time. Whereas for a novice who doesn't know what's good, a novice who's never experienced high level or high quality, why should they be don't trust them with giving themselves feedback, because they probably give themselves the wrong feedback. Then the coach will externally have to correct them, which will tear down their confidence, because a novice thinks that they're making all the progress by themselves. So we've got this split between novice and elite performer. We want to get performers to the point where they can give themselves intrinsic feedback, but in order to get to that point, earlier on in someone's development, extrinsic feedback is more likely to be used and required from that more knowledgeable other. And then when that person gets better and they have an awareness of what good is, they can then always be comparing their most recent performance to that good model and then make tweaks themselves. Which leads us into types of guidance, a final part for today. So we have visual, we have verbal, we have manual, and we have mechanical. If you're going to write these down, do it now. You've got four types of guidance, 6 types of feedback, 5 parts of SMART target. Checking my maths there. 5 for SMART, 6 for feedback, and now 4 for guidance. Visual, verbal, manual, mechanical. Now you're probably already thinking visual, fairly self-explanatory, verbal, fairly self-explanatory. The tricky ones to remember really are manual and mechanical, but we'll go through each of them anyway, just so you're clear on each. So visual guidance, showing a performer. Showing. Now think about your senses, eyesight, teaching someone, coaching someone, using data that you can put through their eyes. Like this. Now you can see me, you can see the slides, you can also hear me. I hope you can anyway, but that's our verbal. Visual is showing the correct technique. It could be a demonstration, it could be use of video, it could be a flashcard or a picture. Anything that we can show the person. Why? Well, so then when the person is actually completing the task or the skill, they have this memory of watching what it should look like. They can constantly be comparing how they can see themselves moving. They can compare that to what they just saw from the visual guidance. Now, visual guidance alone isn't the best. Well, none of them by themselves are the best. Now, imagine if we muted this now, you'd just be left with the words on the screen, which would help to some extent, but I'd like to think that the added commentary, the verbal commentary, can work with it, can add something to it. So verbal, and we will look at some examples very shortly. Verbal guidance is the telling, it's the auditory, it's voice. It could be the cue words, it could be timing instructions, the key teaching points. I literally just said there, right, we've got 5 SMART targets, or just the term SMART itself. You know, that's a verbal cue. SMART target, okay, SMART stands for 5 different words. Each one of those words has got its own definition, but if I just remember SMART, I'm more likely to then be able to recall everything else. So for a sporting action, it could be something like head. A swimmer, a head position, so important. It could be chest up for someone who's landing or jumping. If you're dealing with these gross motor skills of a young person and you're trying to teach them how to jump correctly, it could be something like eyes forward, this verbal cue that you can drum into them and you can say all the time that they're practicing to help jog their memory, to just remind them of the key teaching points. So it could be a phrase, SMART target. It could be trigger words. It could be during the skill, and most importantly, it can be used with visual. So what's a powerful way to guide someone to learn something new? Well, it's to show them the perfect demonstration and to perhaps pause and highlight and talk about each key thing. So if you were to watch a tennis serve, for example, you could pause that movement action, you could pause it at each phase, and you could circle to draw attention, to highlight the visual importance of the head position. Then in the throw phase, you can highlight the elbow, the shoulder, and the hand all in line. You can highlight the hips. You can highlight it, you can show them and then say why. You can create these trigger words and phrases. Make things easier to remember. So, visual, verbal. They were the 2 that hopefully are easier to understand. The next 2, manual and mechanical. Important that you don't get these mixed up. The way that I've remembered these before and how I try and teach people to remember is manual, Look at the front. Look at the front of the word man. It takes a person. Whereas mechanical, it's machine. It doesn't require a person. It requires an item or an object. So manual is with man or with woman. With woman. So man, woman, person. It's physically moving the person. This manual interaction, this physical interaction. It could be that someone who is, go back to that learning to jump thing, and they land, you say, right, freeze in that position. And it might be that as a PE teacher or a coach, you then actually manipulate that person's body to create this new shape. So the person who lands with their chest forward looking down, you can say, right, tilt your head back, pull your shoulders back, bend your knees. You can manually move them into their new body position. Because before that time, especially the novice performer, probably hadn't experienced that body position. They didn't know that that was the good thing. So if we now combine this manual guidance to create the right feelings and link that with positive feedback and that praise, wow, excellent position. This is what I want to see. Great knee bending. Great that your chest is up, facing forwards. So don't think of all of the things that we've done today as, isolated things. We're always, as coaches, teachers, performers, trying to use the best combination of all of them to promote the best learning. So manual guidance could be for safety reasons as well. If you've got someone who's doing their first somersault, you can be next to them and you can use a certain hand grip so that you can almost throw them over, and if they are going to fall, you're there to support them. But you can guide them through that motion for the first few times so that they can build up this awareness. They start to learn the sensory information that's linked to a successful somersault, also known as kinesthesis. Last one then, mechanical, I didn't change the manual guidance up at the top there, apologies for that, but mechanical guidance. This is the use of machinery or items or instruments to guide and support the action. Now, there's different reasons for this. This isn't just for novices trying to get better who are, say, a swimmer, scared of drowning, but it could be for a golfer who's using resistance bands to increase resistance so that they get a greater awareness of how their body needs to move correctly. So it can focus movement. It can break a skill down into a simplified version. Going back to swimming just there, if you give any swimmer a float to hold on to, they no longer need to worry about their hand positions. They can just focus all their attention and energy onto their leg kicks. So mechanical guidance, the use of instruments and aids and machinery and objects to aid action, to help teach the correct movement or to simplify movement down so that greater focus can be paid to certain areas. So, to quickly give you some examples, we've got four different cases where different types of guidance are being used. In that top one, with the baseball player, we've got visual guidance. If you were to give anyone this picture compared to their annotated version of it, with no words, no manual input, just two pictures, pro versus them, they'll be able to see the difference. They'll be able to draw out what they need to change. It could be their hips. It could be the angle of their arms or the tilt of their body. They'll be able to see visually what they need to change. Bottom left, a football coach bringing people in at half-time or in a training session, talking through tactics. Now there's no TV screen there or no video analysis software, so the coach is relying on using their voice to spread the instructions, to simplify key words, so that the players can remember how they should be playing. He could be talking about the formation that they're about to go back and use, reminding them of 4-4-2, stay wide, short pass, these simplified phrases. Tennis coach manually So look, it's physical contact, manually moving this young boy's arm through this tennis shot, making sure that the grip is correct. Before this, the boy might not have known how to swing the racket, or he might have just been guessing every single time. Whereas hopefully after this, and the coach moves his arm through the correct swing motion enough times, the boy's body and brain starts to learn that motion. Take away the manual guidance, the performer can go and use their own intuition. And lastly, the swimmer there with the boy, with this the swimming float. So for this person, now that they've got that float trapped between their legs, they won't need to worry about their hip position. Well, that could be the focus of this. You never know. They might be doing front crawl or breaststroke and their hips drop too low into the water. That could be the error. So by trapping a float between your legs and getting that extra buoyancy, this person can now learn what it feels like to have a flat body in the water. They can now start to adjust their front crawl stroke with this new body position. Or it could be that the person wants to try and focus on their timing and their breathing. And by removing the need for leg kicks, they can put all of their focus and attention on their catch, on their stroke, on their breathing technique. Now ideally, we combine all of these together. We show someone what can be improved. We talk them through what can be improved. We then support them if they're learning a new skill for the first time so they get a feel for it, and then we can remove ourselves and leave a mechanical piece of guidance until they're done with that, and then we take that away. And gradually, we can teach someone, hopefully, or pretty much anything, with effective guidance. And when they start to make progress or they have an attempt, we use our feedback. So, to summarise, 3 different sections from today: targets, feedback, guidance, smart targets, specific, measurable, accepted, realistic, time-bound. Then we have our types in the gold there, our types of feedback, those 6 types on the 3 different scales or continuums: positive, negative, results or performance, extrinsic, intrinsic. And then our 4 types of guidance: visual, verbal, manual, and mechanical. Just move myself out of the way there. Which brings us to the end. So hopefully by now you now know what smart targets are and the different types of feedback and guidance. Hopefully you can define and explain all of those and be able to link feedback, guidance and smart targeting into sporting situations. We looked at 4 just then at the end, with football, baseball, swimming and tennis, 1 in the middle. So just to give you an idea of how they can be applied. Which brings us to the end. So I hope you found that useful. If you did, then by all means, tune in for the next time, which will be in 2 days' time if you are with us on the live series at the moment. If you are watching this on demand or on repeat in the portal, then definitely download the worksheets and the workbook to go with this and the flashcards, etc. If you're watching this not in the portal and you want to become part of the portal so that you can use the worksheets, then head over to theptutes.com, where there's plenty more information about the portal as well as everything else that we do, which is one-to-one, group classes, the resource shop, etc. But yeah, I've been Johnny. This has been GCSE Group Class Live at the moment, or on demand in the portal. I hope you found it useful, and I look forward to working with you again very soon. See you later.